Hello and welcome to Rainy Hill Designs. In this video I'll show you how to make the Weekender window pouch a neat zip pouch with a clear front panel so you can see exactly what's inside. It's a great project for confident beginners with plenty of scope to personalise it if you're more experienced. I'll guide you through the construction step by step and share a few helpful tips along the way. Let's get started. Demelza's doing the sewing today, so we're going to follow along as she's got everything cut out and ready to go. Now you take your zip and your zip fabrics. You need to measure these because zip tapes are not all the same width, so we can't give you a measurement. What we're doing here is we're working out how wide we need to sew it. So take it to the machine and sew it down one side. Now these are the short sides you're sewing. We're going to sew both of these. I'm just speeding up the second one to make it a bit clearer, a bit faster. Once you've sewn them, you're going to finger press them in half there with the seam in the centre and open that up and give that a little finger press. Then thread it onto the end of your zip with the seam to the back side of your zip, and then sew 1/2 inch seam allowance across the end, and you can do that twice, one on each end, and then pull them out and you'll see that you've now got nice little ends. Onto the hanging dangler, so you take your handle fabric and fold it in half and iron, and then fold the sides to the middle. Now if you've been watching our videos you've seen us do this before. This is something we do over and over again. Sides to middle, and then Demelza's going to press it in half for us now. She's very thorough with her pressing. She's going to press it in half in a minute. There you go. So that's a nice neat handle now. Take it over to the machine and sew down. Now she's clipped it here, which is a good idea, and you do sew the side with the open side first and the folded side second. Gives a neat finish. Demelza doesn't show that here because it doesn't really matter. Now take your main body of your fabric and fold it in half, right sides together, and press it. There you go, nicely pressed. Open it out with the wrong side up. Give it a quick spray with your 505 or whatever you use to fix wadding. Put down your wadding and fuse it in place. Now you can use pins, you can use clips, you can do whatever floats your boat. And you'll notice that one side is flappy, technical term, so lay down that zip that you've made so that it is up into that crease. And here Demelza is just checking to make sure that it's centred and that it is up there, right up to the top of the crease. And then clip. Now clip each end and then the middle. That is the rules of sewing. Over to the machine. Now God bless my little ambidextrous girl. She's actually sewing this left-handed. Really you should always have your sewing to the left-hand side of your machine, but to her it doesn't make any difference because she's ambidextrous. Now here she's just pulling the zip pull out of the way just so that it lets her keep a nice smooth straight line of sewing. And secure your stitching at either end. Now you can be sewing with a 2.5 stitch at this stage because you're not working with vinyl. But now it's time for the vinyl. So there's the sheet of vinyl. She's laying that right sides down onto the vinyl and clipping it in place, either end and the middle. And she's going to be left-handed, but she's going to have a brainwave here. She's suddenly going to remember that she didn't read the instructions. Flip it over and sew it from the clear side. It just allows you to see where your stitching is going to be. And here she's just going to put her hand under the vinyl to pull out of the way. Now you don't want to go too close to the teeth when you stitch this line of sewing because it makes putting the binding on very difficult. Okay, so it's time for the binding. So take your binding maker and slide the 1.5 inch strip that you made that you cut out when you were doing the cutting onto the binding maker. And I find it can be useful you can use an awl or a pin or something just to get it started coming through there. Now what you're going to do now is press it Now, Demelza has pressed it. She's used a smaller binding maker so that the sides go all the way to the middle. And she's quite right. That is one of the main ways you will see a bias tape. This isn't actually bias, but a tape, a folded tape. You'll notice if you've watched the EMA video that I actually didn't fold mine in half. I folded mine sort of 1/4 of an inch from either side so that you had... basically you can see the wrong side of the fabric in a line all the way down the middle. It does make putting the binding on easier doing it my way because you've got a slightly wider binding. Now Demelza managed it and it looks fabulous, but if you find yourself struggling at all, go up a size with your binding maker and you should find then that you've got a wider binding and it should be much easier. So sew the binding on. And what we're going to do here is we're going to open out one side of our binding and we're going to line it up along that zip tape edge. Here we're pointing out the fold line that you can see. So match the ends and start clipping. And then follow down the whole length of that zip. Now, you'll only have to do one side of the zip because if you think about it, the other side is actually encased in that folded fabric. So it's all clipped on and folded back. We're just having a look here at the stitching. And you're going to sew down that groove there. So switch your foot over so that you have your sewing on the left. So she's being right-handed now for a minute. So reverse your stitching, secure your stitching and sew all the way along. And there you can see that it's actually stitched on nice and straight. And then turn it over and flip the binding over so that it encases that edge, and you can see here that she's folding it. Now, as I say, this probably looks a little bit tighter and fiddlier because Demelza's binding is slightly narrower. If you do it with the wider binding, then it won't be as difficult. So clip it all in place, and then you're going to run down on the machine. I'd recommend you use a matching thread here. It will make it look a lot neater. If you think you can do a really nice straight line, then go for it and do a contrasting thread or whatever floats your boat. But as I say, a matching thread I think would look very neat. Now we've folded our pouch in half, right sides together. We've made sure that those tapes on the ends of the, those little ends on the ends of the zip are folded in half nice and neatly. And we're going to sew the 3 sides together to make basically a pouch. I would recommend that you start at the bottom edge and sew up towards the zip as Demelza is doing here, because most sewing machines will not like that bulky top end, and just starting at the bottom and sort of getting a bit of a run up to it is a good idea. As you can see, Demelza's machine's doing great. Now we take a ruler or a tape and we mark 1 1/4 inch squares in the 2 bottom corners. So these are the corners furthest away from the zip. And take your time and do this neatly and accurately, and you want them to be lovely and square. And then cut them out using your best, sharpest scissors. Feels a little bit counterintuitive cutting chunks out of something you've just sewn, but yeah. Now cut your tape into even-sized pieces. So you want a piece for either side and a piece for the bottom edge. They don't need to be exactly the same. In fact, a little bit bigger is better, really. Now, take your hanging dangler. If you haven't already remembered to put this in, this is actually a really good way of doing it, because before you had to worry about where it was going. Now you can just unpick a little bit of stitching where you want it to go, and then you'll see Demelza folds it in half, tucks it in, make sure there's a good bit protruding out through the hole so that you can definitely make sure you're catching hold of it, and then when you sew the binding on, that's going to hold that in place. It just saves you worrying about it when you're sewing it together. So here you'll see the 3 pieces, and you repeat the process of binding those 3 seams. Now the two sides, you need longer at the top where the zip is. As you can see, there's like a little tail sticking out. So sew down that groove and then fold it back neatly. You can do it this way. You can actually fold it so that it goes up and over the zip too. We'll show you that in another video. And then you flip it round, fold it over, clip it as we did before. Take care to tidy the end up and make sure it's nice and neat. And then you're going to top stitch that as well. Now you're going to do this for all three sides of your pouch that are raw edges, leaving your little corner pieces. Now I've super speeded this up so that you're getting the idea now. But here you'll see all three sides nice and neat. Now take your corners and pull them so that the vinyl is to vinyl and the fabric is to fabric. I don't know if you can see that. You sort of match up the seams in the middle and then let the vinyl be over one side and the fabric. Now you'll see here, flip the seams each way and nest them. If you've ever done any patchwork, you'll know what that means, but basically make sure that they're lined up, clip them, and then machine across using your 1/4 inch seam and a 3.5 stitch length, because you are sewing through the vinyl. And you'll see you're going to do the same on the other side. Now when you do flip the seams side to side, take care to make sure that your bottom they're all going in the same direction. It will look much neater in the finished bag. So 1/4 inch seam here on this side too, and then bind it. Now you're going to make your binding a little longer, and that's what it's going to look like when you've stitched it. Flip it round, tuck it under, clip it down, or hold it. I think she's going to hold it, and then machine it, and there you go. How neat is that? Same to do on the other side. Both done, and here we have it. Now you just simply turn it through, and there you have your Weekender window pouch. If you've enjoyed this project, you're very welcome to subscribe for more sewing patterns and tutorials. You'll find the full Weekender window pouch pattern linked below. Thanks so much for sewing along with us here at Rainy Hill Designs. See you again.